Well, right now we're at a very interesting stage in terms of history. We are experiencing a crisis at a scale that we have never experienced before. And the entire environment, the society, the economy, it's changed tremendously. And really, it's a time to adapt. So, in a very short and very simplistic way, the positive of a business evolution is that you'll be able to successfully survive, and not only that, deliver value and hopefully capture profits. The negative is if you don't evolve in the appropriate way, not only will you not survive, but you might end up really disastrous, spending too much resource on something that could be entirely unnecessary, unrealistic, misaligned with the market, and misaligned with the reality of the entire economy. Business evolution to me is basically when you align your business to the market and you adapt it to the market. So right now, the current situation is we have a crisis. If you look at it, you could say it's a standalone business risk. It's affecting business in a very substantial way. However, what this crisis really is at the same time is it's an amplifier. It's actually amplifying current trends. It's also amplifying the current vulnerabilities of your business. So business evolution is basically when you are essentially adapting your business to the current trends and you're fixing the vulnerabilities that exist for your business. And that is really what all businesses should do. If right now, this current month, this current week, your business is still the same business model as it was before, then you're doing something very, very wrong because the entire circumstances, the entire dynamic of the market has changed drastically since the start of this crisis. So evolution is not only something we have to really understand, evolution is essential. You would be more or less blind to ignore it. This is something that you're either doing willfully, proactively, intentionally, or something that you're doing reactively, recklessly, maybe blindly even. I think this really depends on the sort of circumstances we're facing. So, as I mentioned, if you look at all the current impact of the current pandemic, it is something that we really haven't experienced before. We have never experienced in human history a pandemic where countries globally are locking down their economies. The financial and economic impact is much greater than the Great Recession 2008, much greater than 9/11, much greater than anything we have ever experienced. The positive side in relation to the question is this. The positive side is that unlike many of the incidents in the past, we actually have a pretty really accurate way of predicting what's going to happen next in terms of trajectory of development. There are really three phases, and this relates to the weight. So the first phase of the current crisis is this. The immediate phase is the immediate shock. Countries locked down, businesses are restricted. The second phase we can anticipate happening is eventually, as the virus starts to be controlled, there will be some normalization. Economy will start to resume again. And then the final phase, which is also a bit touching on what Jonathan mentioned, is when we have the new dynamics of the market that occurred because of this entire incident. So I think, given the mind that we know the trajectory, we can roughly anticipate what sort of weight we should put into the business evolution. I would say the first thing to focus on really is to react now to survive. The first phase requires us to make sure that our business is survivable. This could be looking at, for example, whether you currently have proper cash flow structures in place to try and control your burn rate and your runway. This could involve whether your value proposition has changed, whether your entire supply chain, your entire distribution model has anything about your business has changed that does not allow you to survive. Once we can make sure that our business can survive, once we can evolve to make sure it survives, then we move on to the next stage, which is identifying opportunities as the market slowly normalizes. And then finally, the final evolution is to reflect on everything that has happened, whether your business model should be improved, whether it should be entirely modeled, whether it should entirely evolve because of what has happened. Maybe you were a brick and mortar store. And then after this entire incident, you realize that no, the way forward really is digital. And this is really the case for most people. So I would say, depending on for all countries, especially for Malaysia, which phase we're at, that's really what you have to focus on first to act now, react, respond, survive, then retool your business so that it's actually more resilient and more future proof and also more innovative than what it was before. And that's what I would say would be the different weight that you focus on. Again, as what I've mentioned at the beginning of tonight's session, In my opinion, a successful business evolution is one where the business is aligned with the realities of the market. So in in order to be successful, to really succeed over another, you have to basically realize what is the reality of the market. And that involves, in my opinion, a framework looking at five different things. First of all, looking at the customer itself, looking at the value proposition, looking at value demonstration and your company's capability. And I'll explain. So, in terms of customers, first of all, realizing that what are the customer demands at the moment? How has it changed? It could be that the customer right now is totally concerned about something entirely different. For example, we can naturally assume that right now everyone is fearful and people might spend much less. They might have much less money to spend with, perhaps only focusing on essential items, perhaps looking at things totally differently. So a business must realize that the customers have changed and the entire dynamic has changed, and they have to realize what it is. Then the second thing is looking at the value proposition. The current goods and services that you offer, the value that you offer, is it really aligning with the customers now? Has it also changed? For example, if you're doing something that would have worked before the MCO, it could be something that's totally irrelevant right now. So also examining whether you can offer value differently. Think about, for example, universities. You know how universities physically you would go to a classroom and you get value there, but now of course that thing has changed entirely. You can't offer value that way. You might have to do it through other ways. And then think about value demonstration. How are you marketing yourself to the customers? Is it because of the changes, restrictions? Now you have to talk to them through a different way. And then finally, look at the final thing, which is the capabilities of the company, whether you have the infrastructure, the technology, the culture to do these things. So, in order for a business to succeed over another, in my opinion, is when they are able to successfully, realistically meet these five things. So, if you have a product that meets exactly the customer's demand right now, you have a value proposition that is valuable enough right now, and you also have a way to demonstrate it enough, and you have the technologies to do it, then you will succeed over the other. Right now, you see a lot of startups, a lot of businesses in Asia, because everyone's starting to do similar things. They're just trying to imitate each other, but they don't realize that maybe among some of these five things, their company, their business isn't aligned enough to the reality. So I would say, in order to really differentiate, in order to really succeed over another, you have to make sure that you're successfully tapping into these five things accurately, realistically as well. And that would be the thing. So, for example, let's say if someone's doing an e-commerce business trying to find something to sell, that product is relevant enough, reflects the customer's demand, offers enough value, demonstrated in the best way. Maybe right now people prefer live streaming, for example, rather than single graphic ads. And also you have the technology, the team, and the culture to execute it. Then I think you would succeed over all the other competitors out there at the moment. I think a business evolution is good when it aligns your business to the market, when you create the right product market fit. I think that's when you have a good evolution. I think basically what we are seeing right now, my main emphasis tonight is that the entire market itself has changed. So if you are not adapting your business to the new rules, the new landscape, you are not aligned. And if you're not aligned, that your customers are not going to go to you, they're not going to buy your products, they're not going to buy your services. So a good evolution is when you are able to adapt your entire business, especially in this context right now, to the new landscape, and you're able to be valuable again to the market, to your customers. That's when your evolution is good. For a lot of people, this is easier said than done. For some, maybe your business is already along the lines of being digitized or having the right structures in place. It's easy for you. But there are so many businesses in Asia that are not there. They are so ingrained with the traditional way of doing business that this virus has forced them to realize that you have to change. And again, as I mentioned, and also as Jonathan mentioned, amplification. Why is it amplification? Think about this. All of us today, we're using our phones. We're going on the computer, we're watching YouTube at night, we're watching Netflix rather than going to the cinemas. It's so amazing how digital we are as people, yet a lot of the basic things in business we still do in such a traditional way. Even something as simple as having a meeting, we have to travel all the way to someone else's office to basically meet them when we can easily do what we're doing right now. A lot of these things we're currently experiencing, we're forced to experience, are actually already there, waiting for us to gradually discover it. And this entire crisis has pretty much amplified the trend and any vulnerability that we have if we are lagging behind. So again, to reemphasize, a good evolution in business, in my opinion, is really one where your business is finally aligned to the new landscape of the market. And it could be aligned partially or fully, or maybe some bits, but full alignment would be the perfect evolution, I think. And maybe some of us are more aligned than others. Some of us are more evolved than others. Some of us are less evolved. And that's what a good evolution is. Advice, I would say, for those of the people right now currently struggling as to what to do, this is my cheat sheet. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, look at the situation. The first thing to focus on is to survive, respond to it. I think right now the biggest issue for a lot of businesses right now in terms of basic evolution is one of cash flow. We did a survey actually on our platform where I think we had about 3,000 respondents, but about 67% of them actually responded that they don't think they can last another 2 months even, just purely on the basis of cash flow. So the first evolution to focus on, if you don't have a target, is to first of all look at your cash flow position. Are you a company that's currently making money? And also, what is your burn rate? If let's say you're a startup, you might have zero money. Then look at how much money you're burning every month, and then calculate how much money you have in your company account and how long you'll survive. And then look at how you can adjust your cash flow. Get rid of the unnecessary cash flow if you can. And then after that, once you have been able to plot out just a basic survival lifeboat strategy, the next thing to look at is really what I mentioned earlier as well, tying in what I said, which is to look at the customers, look at how they've changed, look at what is the current demand, what is the current customer desire, what are they looking for, look at how you can deliver value so you can adjust your value proposition to the new customer, look at also how you can basically develop capabilities for that. Then with that, you can start to evolve yourself to now not only first of all survive, but slowly start to capture profits, hopefully. And then finally, after all that, and this is where Jonathan's point ties in, realize that everything you've done so far is basically a challenge to how you have been doing things, and realize that you are an entrepreneur. What is that? You are a business builder. Business building is something you should never stop. You should never be so used to the way that things work and then you just sit back and then you just do the same things. You have to be ready to pivot. You have to be ready to do massive changes to your business, to your strategy, to how you do things. So in terms of a cheat sheet, that's really it. First of all, make sure you can survive, identify the new market, realize how it is, align yourself, and then be able to pivot and be able to make the necessary changes. And that is basically how you can overcome the challenge of business evolution in this current period. So let's talk about branding. Right now, there's a question of whether, because we have a lot of readers asking this question, is it a good time to try and proactively generate to spend money on advertising marketing to try and capture leads right now? And a lot of businesses at this moment, they're not even focusing on that at all. They're not doing any ad spending at the moment. They're trying to be safe. But realize that actually customers right now, they do have their own demand. They do expect brands to do certain things. For example, they do expect brands to be more proactive and more compassionate to them. And I find that the businesses that are able to be more compassionate during this period, they tend to win over the customers over others that are just trying to generate conversions and sales. And that's a really interesting thing. You see a lot of big businesses doing the same thing. For example, I think it's Marriott or Hilton. They have the Hotel for Hopes program where they're actually selling rooms at really cheap prices, close to the places where you have these frontliners. And a lot of people have responded really well to that, just because it's so aligned to our current collective feeling about the situation. And then also you see other businesses gearing themselves, trying to be more proactive on the CSR front. They are capturing people. Look at the Walmart strategy. Walmart is a giant, convenient grocery hypermarket chain in the US. And what they've done to stand out over the others is, I think they started this trend, which is now followed in Malaysia. But basically, they're the first ones where the CEO went on a massive Zoom session with over a million, I think not a million, but a lot of workers, and just thanking them transparently for the market to see. And that has allowed them to win a lot of upvotes and positive feelings from customers, realizing that, hey, look, they are compassionate. And then yet I see other businesses that are doing what? They're just doing promotions, and they're not even hiding the fact they're trying to make money. They're not being aligned. And that's why I see that you see a lot of businesses now trying to attempt to engage with the community. They're doing these random things like collective yoga classes on Zoom, just to let people feel that they're doing something for the community, and that you can trust them. And it's not just about making money. And I think those people will stand out much more than just another run-of-the-mill e-commerce store doing a discount. And I think that is a really important thing. They have the stronger brand value in that sense. Yeah. I like how you brought up the voucher thing, because that you are seeing that so common everywhere. And you can understand why. All these SMBs, these small medium businesses, they have serious cash flow issues. So they're trying to generate as much cash as possible. Yeah, the profit margin has, obviously swelled down, but they're trying to get money. And then what are they doing? Think about the proposition. They are trying to get money from you to survive. So why should you give them money? I mean, the point is this. The point is, right now, the ones that stand out are the businesses that can actually lock into everyone's dialogue, which is that everyone is suffering. And if they feel that you are actually compassionate, you are relatable, then those are the ones that are actually going to stand out from the others. So I like the point about the vouchers, because now is a good time to look at all these deals. But there's so many. Everyone is doing the exact same thing, that it's no longer exceptional. In a normal situation before the MCO, before the lockdown, a voucher is a pretty different thing, because it shows that all of a sudden you have this special discount. But now the new normal is everything is discounted. That alone is not going to motivate someone, especially if you have a homogeneous product, like a similar product that you could get somewhere else. I think this is a very good question, because I think this is a question on everyone's mind. What's going to happen after the MCO, after the crisis? The current leading position is that two things could happen. One thing for many industries, what we could see is pent up demand. And what that talks about is really that people have been wanting to buy a lot of things, but because they can't, they're restricted. So right after the MCO, there might be a slight surge in the short term of demand. Another one is where, you know, even after the MCO, things are still quite slow. Demand itself is still shocked. Um, I think looking at different industries, it's either one or the other. I think it could be pent up demand, it could be demand shock. But certainly the major changes will be that a lot of the consumption behaviors that we see right now, how consumers behave, I think a lot of that will carry forward. Once people get used to the convenience of doing certain things now, for example, buying something online, that might just be the new normal right after this entire period, and that might never revert. So I think for businesses to serve them right now is a very important time for you to test these hypotheses. And what I mean is, as we talked about the entire session, evolve yourself, actively monitor how your evolution, what sort of feedback and what sort of reception you're getting, and then try and project how that's going to carry forward. And I think that's how you can serve them. It starts again with the evolution, but it also comes with a lot of being critical, observation, looking at how they're actually receiving the sort of changes you've made. But yeah, I think a lot of the behaviors that we're seeing now, they will certainly carry forward. I think the world for many industries will change quite permanently. Once we get used to certain things, a lot of things come into question. For example, something like co-working spaces or even offices. Once a lot of people get used to remote working, then these entrepreneurs, is it still necessary for us to get a co-working space or to even rent out an office space once we know that, hey, productivity might not be affected? We're all used to working like this. A lot of things will change. This crisis will show consumers what is a prospective sort of market that we could be in and sort of society that we could have. So yeah, it would definitely change. And how businesses can serve them is testing it now and also being ready to invest in infrastructure and in change. Um, so at the moment, excuse me, at the moment, we actually know quite a few startups in property space. They have actually been working on quite innovative technology. A lot of them have actually been working on, for example, virtual reality in terms of showcasing, and also even remote working in terms of how you coordinate an entire sales team. And what is so interesting is that for these people right now, they're having a field day because this crisis has all of a sudden happened. and the traditional industry is more or less locked. And so now you have all these convenience of actually accessing real estate agent as consumers through all these innovative ways. And I think the only way for real estate agents to really survive post-crisis is also to adopt these new innovative technologies. Look at all these startups in the prop space, what they're doing, because a lot of stuff they're doing now is getting immense traction just because it's a perfect timing for it. And I think it's a great thing. I do want to add on actually, other spaces I think we can watch besides property as well is fintech. Fintech is having an amazing time at the moment. In fact, one of the most famous investors, Warren Buffett, he's actually lost close to $19 billion in investment just because he didn't invest in fintech. And right now, it's a fintech time to shine, payment, contactless payment even. A lot of countries, they've actually introduced measures trying to make sure that you do not have contact payment. They're trying to, for example, in South Korea, all these notes that get circulated to central bank, they actually hold it back for 2 weeks to disinfect it. They're telling everyone to try and go contactless. So all these changes are happening in fintech, in e-commerce, in real estate, in logistics. The biggest winner right now, one of them is actually logistics, because there's massive growth in e-commerce, and you need the logistics infrastructure for that. So you're seeing that even in Malaysia, Ninja Van, all these different people doing incredible stuff. And not only that, gaming, streaming entertainment, all these different areas are now seeing these massive changes and booms. And I think if you are a industry, or you're a business that is in one of these industries or competing with one of them, or you're targeting the same consumers, you need to start to study what these innovative startups are doing, because a lot of them right now have the right traction. This is a great question because the first part of the statement is an amazing thing. The suggestion that this is not the last crisis, in fact, it isn't. In fact, if you look at the development of the world economy, you will see that it's crisis after crisis. There's actually a really fantastic book that I suggest to all the readers here. It's called The Black Swan by this really famous economist. And basically, the Black Swan describes these events that happen in our world that changes things entirely, from politics, economics, to business, to everything. If we look at the last big crisis that made the biggest impact on business and economics, it's actually World War II. That has actually changed the world to the way it is. A world where we try and scale and we try and find these global supply chains, like going to China to get product, to get supply. Jonathan mentioned about the online aspect, so I won't touch on that. But I think future-wise, what we're seeing from this current crisis is a major change in supply chain strategy. What am I talking about? So supply chain is the idea of where do we get the supply of our goods, of our products, our technology from. Most of it is from the same place. Most of it is from China. We go to these giant sources, and then these global sources, we get them. But what we have seen even before this crisis is that a lot of these sources are not stable. For example, something like the US and Chinese trade war, that can affect a lot of things for trade. So I think what this current crisis is teaching us beyond digitization is that we have to start to decentralize our business, not rely so much on these giant sources, not trying to scale so much, but rather to decentralize how we do business. A good example is, for example, Zara. Zara is actually, although a global business, it's actually quite a decentralized business, because the way that it approaches holding stock is that every single region, they actually control their own stock level, and they try and source supplies from different suppliers rather than just one. I think right now the biggest people that hit in business, especially in the traditional industries, are those that are relying on a single giant source of supply. And now all of a sudden they cannot get any more supply. They're stuck and they can't produce more things. They can't sell to more customers. So I think this crisis is teaching us that we have to change our supply strategy, our supply chain strategy. And we have to look for more decentralized route to the way that we approach this. And there's a more decentralized way of doing business. I think largely yes. This question actually we touched on a bit. I think largely yes, at least for the survival bit right now, where a lot of businesses can't operate. So for a lot of them, going digital is the only route to reach the market, really, because again, you cannot physically do it at the moment. But also what we mentioned earlier, I think not all businesses, even if they digitize, they can still reach the market. Again, the main points that I mentioned tonight, it really is about understanding your customer demand for your product and understanding about your value proposition. If you're one of the lucky ones, and suppose many of them are, you're one of the lucky ones where you can digitize, then you should digitize, because this is the only option you have right now. And it's also very much going to be the new way of doing things going forward after this crisis. So if you are a business that has not digitized yet, and somehow before this crisis you were lagging behind, you didn't even have, let's say, an online store, your own website or something, this really is a time, this is a wake up call that you have to make that change now. But then again, really depends on how you do it, which depends on how you understand your customer and your value. The very important thing is to firstly study your customer and really realize that what do they want and how you can offer value to them. There are a lot of examples of businesses right now that are not necessarily focusing just on digitizing and they're still capturing a lot of profits. Digitization is really an access to market way, and it's also a marketing way. But then the real thing that you have to do is offer value. So, for example, Inside Scoop, obviously they sell ice creams, and you can only do ice cream deliveries for as far as you can because it's something that's perishable. But then what they have done is that they've actually encouraged people to think about it as a bulk order, buying it for your entire community and pushing this concept. So that is a conceptual thing, not necessarily a digital thing. It really depends on what your customer is currently feeling, what is their current demand, and how you can offer value. So it's not always about digitization. It's about studying them and realizing what you can do and being creative. And that really is what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is a person that discovers, these truths about the world, these desires about the world, and they can tap into that, and they're really innovative and able to actually offer value for that. So yeah.